Hi there, welcome to the Gardens and Graveyard channel. My name is Charisma and today we are meeting in the garden and we are going to take a little walk around the garden together and talk about weeds. Today is National Weed Appreciation Day, and this time of year we have lots of weeds to appreciate or not appreciate. But I thought it would be fun to just kind of walk through the garden and talk about the weeds that we have here on the Oregon coast in a Zone 9A where I live, and how I take care of them, how I embrace them. We could talk about medicinal qualities of the weeds that are growing in our garden and whether or not I use them for those purposes. And also we could talk about invasive weeds versus native weeds and why it's important to differentiate them. And then I'll also show you a few weeds that some people will pull because they don't want them, they consider them a weed, and I embrace them and love them and want them in my garden. So we're going to talk about weeds today because it's Weed Appreciation Day. So I'm going to get the camera turned around and we'll just start here in the backyard and walk around. Okay, so I think I'm gonna come this direction and I will point out this is Creeping Jenny, and it escaped these little pots right here. You see all the new growth coming up here. And I cut it back last year, but you can see some of those tendrils are getting in there again. So in some cases, this may be considered a weed. This may be like, I put you in these pots. I don't want you being a ground cover. I personally love it. I think it's beautiful, and it was just like happy accident and super surprised that it did what it did, and I'm gonna just let it keep going. And as a matter of fact, these pots were over there when this happened, and I actually moved them over here in hopes that we can get it to keep going over here. This little grouping brings me to the next weed. This is Crocosmia. This is Crocosmia lucifer, and it has much better structure than the Crocosmia that grows in the ditches around here, but it will just kind of take over if you aren't careful. And so many people do not like to grow Crocosmia in their garden. I love Crocosmia, especially this particular variety. So I actually dig up these clumps and put them all over the garden. So I have them everywhere. I'm going to come over into the moon garden because we have quite a few things over here. We're going to start over here in this little, kind of like a ditch between our house and the sidewalk. And we have several weeds to showcase. Here is a dandelion. I do not let dandelions grow in my garden, just anywhere. Well, this one needs to be dug out, but they are medicinal. You can eat dandelion, especially this size. It's really tender and it would actually be pretty tasty in a salad, but I don't eat mine. And the taproot isn't going to be good enough to dig out and dry. All right, so then over here I have what's called bittercress. It's this little guy. Can't get a good picture of it. And this one is about ready to flower. It sends off these long stalks and then it'll flower. It has these little teeny tiny white flowers that have 1,000,000 seeds. So if this was in flower and I pulled it, immediately a bunch of seeds would just fling everywhere. So you can see I have a few more in here. There's also a euphorbia, this is the native one. I let those grow in my garden. I'm fine with it. There's another bitter cress and another one. Bitter cress will just keep growing everywhere, and you have to throw it away in a garbage bag if you don't want it to grow in your garden. And then I have native violas, which I let grow in my garden, but some people will eradicate. And then I have foxglove that has been seeded over here, and it just keeps coming back every year, and again, doesn't bother me. Over here, I have archangel or lamium. A lot of people will pull lamium. You could see it is going down the hill. It's all around the lilac. It snakes over here. It's back behind these benches, and it goes all the way down. It goes all the way down the hill this way. I think it's beautiful, so I leave it alone. In my garden, and I can only speak for my garden because I have neighbors that remove lamium. Not direct neighbors, but like a few blocks over. I know of a couple of people that don't want lamium in their garden. So I don't see this growing in my neighbor's garden on either side of me. So right, I'm not being a culprit of, you know, making my neighbors have lamium. For me, in my garden, it naturally prunes in the sunshine. I have no idea what variety this is because it was here when I moved in. But the minute the tendrils get out in full sun, they stop growing. So like, I don't have to weed them out of my pathways. All my pathways are pretty much in sun. I don't weed them out of my pathways because they just don't grow in there. And yeah, I don't know. They're just like very well behaved, and they help with the erosion. So I like having them, and they bring a lot of color and interest to really shady spots in my garden. So I like them. They do have a purple blue flower. It's fairly insignificant, and I just let them seed and keep growing. Mostly they grow by sending out like tendrils, like vines, and then they self root. All right, let's keep going. Staying here in the moon garden, there's a couple more weeds to show you. We have, oh no, that's an archangel. I think I just weeded it all out right here. I'll show you buttercup in another area. I don't see any right now. Okay, right here, all of this greenery that you see is actually lawn daisies. And, you know, they bloom this time of year, and I think they're super adorable. I'll show you some more that we have throughout the garden. They don't bother me, so I just let them be. Some people will also consider ajuga, or ajuga, however you want to say it, to be a little bit of a headache. Again, I grow it on purpose, love it. This is like one of my favorite ground covers. Of course, some people would consider the moss a weed. It certainly is a bit of a culprit. It grows anywhere. It just stays damp, and like this is growing. It's growing in this pot. And you know, that could be a bit of a problem because it smothers your plants. There's a bunch growing in this pot. You know, in the summertime, it all dries up and goes away. So I'm not overly worried about it myself. You will notice that we mulch our garden. And that just really helps a whole lot with suppressing weeds we don't want in areas we don't want them. we're just gonna keep rolling here. I'm sure there's other things that people consider weeds. I just don't really know. You know, your raspberries could be weedy because they can just pop up everywhere and anywhere in the garden. For example, this is a little raspberry right there that traveled underneath the ground and popped up through the raised bed. So I have to weed those out. All right, so then here we go. We've got some buttercup back here. Now you could see this big clump of buttercup. It just keeps going. There's a bunch over there. There's a whole bunch all in here. I have the native strawberry growing in here, which is the darker green leaf, which I don't mind growing here, but the buttercup is far more aggressive. So we have to stay on top of it and pull it out. Try to pull it out. I usually have to use a digging stick because it's got quite the root system. So there's that. This one, it gets a yellow flower in the late spring and it spreads like mad. It does smother plants. So I don't want that. It doesn't play nice. We also have some grass right here that I don't typically let grow. We just haven't been to this back side of the property for a little while. And you know, the grass was kind of dormant until just like a few weeks ago, but it's just seed from the grass that we have. And that's just, I guess, something that you're just gonna deal with when you have grass in general. Here's another weed that people will try to get rid of is this honeysuckle. And I know that in some areas honeysuckle will grow up through your shrubs and kind of strangle your trees and that kind of thing. We don't have that problem here. It is an evergreen, or semi-evergreen I should say. These, you know, we've got new growth here, but this is last year's growth, and I think it's beautiful. It has an adorable little flower. It smells delicious. It softens these like rustic pallet fences that we've built, and you know, we like it, so we let it grow. Here's another big clump of the crocosmia, and you could see it just kind of spreads everywhere. Cyclamen can be a little aggressive in some people's gardens. Again, we love it. We just grow as much as we can in every variety. You can see a couple of different leaf patterns here that we've grown. Let's head into the back side of the property where it's fairly neglected and there's lots of weeds, and we work not as hard at trying to eradicate the weeds back here because it's not as important to us. We usually come through and weed eat everything down so it doesn't flower and just... The chipmunk doesn't want me back here. He's scolding me. So we try to keep the flowers down, the seeds down, so it doesn't just like spread everywhere, because the seeds can be on your shoes and you can walk through the rest of the garden and then you end up with weeds where you don't want them. So we try to keep them down, but it's not as on the forefront of our mind back here. So again, I'll turn the camera around and show you what we're dealing with back here. So in the back part of our property, we have compost piles, which are growing, I don't know, crocosmia, probably. Is crocosmia? Yeah. These are like clumps of crocosmia that we pulled out that we didn't want to keep. And now they're growing back here. But they grow by corums. So if you could see those little round balls, they produce this one, and then they produce another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. They just keep going further and further and further. And that's how they spread around. We've got tons of buttercup all right here, most likely because we threw the weeds back here when we've weeded them, and now they've rooted in. We've got a little clump of cyclamen there. Always the weeds that are prolific in a person's garden can often be found in their slow composting area. We don't turn this compost, so things tend to grow. Okay, back here we have all of the English ivy, right? And that's a really common weed all over North America. We also have the salal. And salal is actually, it's a native here. It has a wonderful berry that tastes delicious. It's subtle, not as sweet as like a raspberry or marionberry or something like that, but it definitely can be used in desserts and that kind of thing. And a lot of people will use the salal berry to stretch their berry production. So if you didn't have enough raspberries to make a jelly, you can grab some salal berries and make up the difference in the cup of berries that you needed. And then, you know, the English ivy has a lot of like spiritual properties, and especially in the Celtic traditions. But they, you know, they're not really medicinal, I don't think. You might consider some of these sword ferns a weed. Like, we have a million of them. They just grow super natural here. A lot of people in our area will pull the ferns because they just grow like crazy. I have a few different kinds of ferns. This is a licorice fern and the sword ferns. The other thing that we have here is a huckleberry. This is the deciduous huckleberry on both sides here. I also have an evergreen huckleberry. Both of those, some people will remove from their garden. You can't really, it's looking pretty ratty because I didn't cut it back last year. These are last year's leaves, but this plant that looks kind of dead and chewed up, and like maybe it's a blackberry, that's actually a salmonberry, which is also a native berry in our area. Beautiful, beautiful bright pink flowers. Bears love those berries, but people will remove the berries or the berry plants because A, they don't want to attract the bears, and B, you know, they're not like super tasty, and they do kind of act like a blackberry, which are, you know, aggressive and invasive in some ways. All right, what else? We have another clump of the Crocosmia. This is the orange variety. That's like the species variety. It doesn't have great integrity, like it flops really easy. So, you know, not everybody wants that in their garden either. Right here, I have a giant Escallonia. These guys obviously get giant. I mean, look at that thing. It's so huge. And this one in particular was already really big when we moved here. And in the last year or so, it's shown a ton of rot. So we'll be removing those. We replanted a few of them in a different part of the property I forgot to mention a moment ago. But we enjoy them because their flowers attract a ton of pollinators. So right plant, right place, right? Other people that I know have them and they're a nuisance. They don't want them there. They do send out runners and pop up throughout the garden. We made the mistake of using the pruned clippings of this one when we built our medicine bed, and we used it as like that, the lasagna gardening, right? We put the logs on the bottom and straw and compost and that kind of stuff. And for 2, maybe even 3 years, we were fighting the Escallonia popping up in that garden because we had cut the branches off, like they weren't rooted in or anything, but they grew underneath all of that growing medium and popped up at the top. So, you know, grain of salt. They were really easy to pull. They're super easy to root in. They, you know, yeah, I don't know. I like it. I think it's pretty, and I let it grow. When we take that one out, I'll have to decide if I want to leave the stump there to let it grow again, or if I'm going to plant something different there, and I'll have to do like a sucker punch and make sure that the roots don't come, or that the crown does not produce any more plant. I really feel like I want to grow a fig there, so I don't know. We'll see. Okay, let me get the camera turned around and I'll show you a few more things around here. Everything's looking pretty like native, not really weedy, but we'll look at it. So again, I have a whole bunch of foxgloves up in there, and that, you know, some people will not want foxgloves just self-seeding all over their garden. I personally love them, and they are poisonous, so you don't want anybody eating them. But I don't typically eat flowers very often, so unless I really know where they were grown and I know exactly what they are. All right, so then I have a bunch of the Archangel again. Doesn't really come out onto my path, and this is shady. But, you know, I just do a little zip with my weed eater maybe once a year, and it just kind of chills out. It's kind of creeping into this bed, but not bad. And then you see these new green growth ferns. This is a perennial fern that many people will dig out of the garden, and they can be kind of a nuisance. They get way taller than the sword ferns. They can look really messy when they die back. They just make everything look dead and messy. I just let them grow where I don't have anything, and then if I were to plant something here, I would dig them out and remove them. Oftentimes, if I dig up a fern, I just put it over here on the creek bank, because why not? The creek needs erosion control, and, you know, here's the other, like, weed bank in my garden is the creek bank. So lots of salal, which is a native, tons of blackberry. This is the Himalayan blackberry, not the Oregon native blackberry. So those are a nuisance that we try to get out. Like, look at this thing. It's just like so meaty. And it's just like, it goes way over there, all the way, all the way, all the way over there. Fun. All right. Okay, then I have the native evergreen huckleberry, which, I mean, I love these native plants in my garden, so I leave them, but some people may choose to remove those because they grow so well, they act like a weed. And let's see, what else? We've got another little patch of English ivy there. We've got more salal, more huckleberry. This is another slow compost pile. Mostly it's our arborvitae that we removed last fall. But we threw some clumps of iris that we weren't, like, we replanted a lot of iris, but we divided a bunch and we got rid of ones that didn't look really good. Well, look, they're growing, as well as more crocosmia, always. And moving in this direction, more Archangel up there, more crocosmia right there. And see what else we have. We have Saxifraga right here. All of this bright green clumps is Saxifraga. I adore this as a ground cover, and it has the most sweetest bloom stalks ever. And I also have some variegated ones back there. But you know, some people might be like, this is a little much. I'm seeing some movement back there. Oh, we've got a little salamander. Let's see if I could see him. Look at the cute little salamander. Can you see him? Are you gonna move for the people so they can see you good? He's like, I'm not moving. You look like a giant bird that's gonna eat me. I'm not gonna eat you. I promise. Oh gosh, he's one of the little ones. Okay. And then we have Woodruff, which, you know, it can be a little bit aggressive, but it makes a really nice ground cover. So I guess, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that it's invasive, but so let's keep going this way. More Crocosmia. More moss. We have, oh, here. What are these? I always forget what these are called. They're, shoot, I forget. I'll put the name up on the screen. You can see there's a whole bunch of different things going on in here. There's the native viola, and then there's some dandelion. There's some bittercress. But all of these yellow flowers, they grow here because it's really damp soil. I usually come in around this time because the flowers pop up and I'm like, oh, so cute. And there's a whole bunch of weeds. So I come in and I try to eradicate all the weeds. So it looks like it's time for me to do that. But one of the benefits of not keeping your garden like pristine, perfectly weeded are, one, you get to see fun things like the salamander, right? He's using that ground cover and the damp bark and everything like that as a source to keep himself protected. So, like, it's important to me to have frogs and salamanders and, you know, critters hanging out in my garden. And so that's one benefit. The other benefit is if you're super diligent and you pull everything that you haven't planted and make sure that there's like nothing in your garden growing that you didn't plant, you don't get to have fun surprises. And I'm about to show you the best fun surprise. This is a trillium. Isn't she gorgeous? Yes, I have a pot around her. It's you know, it's just a protection collar so that we don't weed this space so that she comes back. But she popped up in here 3 years ago as a surprise because we just hadn't gotten back here and weeded. And this is actually a pathway. You can't tell because we don't use it very often. We have a pathway right here going up to that part of the bank, which normally I would just have been taking my weed eater and just zipping this all the way down to the ground. And thankfully, a few years ago, I didn't do that one spring, and she came up. And she's been coming up every year. And that's just pure magic right there. So I don't want to always be so on top of it that I miss out on some of these beautiful specimens. Trilliums are not a weed. They are a native to our area, well, to Oregon, Pacific Northwest, I think, really. And they don't transplant very well. They just, you can't seem to get seeds for them. Like, you can't just buy a packet of seeds. people go trillium hunting. There's trillium like protection societies. Like, it's not a common, I mean, maybe at one time they were really prolific, but, you know, mankind has taken over the world and their species is not surviving very well. So to have one volunteer in my garden is just so, so special. I've read up on them, and it says that it takes up to 7 years for the seed of a trillium to bloom. And then it said that it only bloomed for 2 or 3 years. So we'll see if this is its third year. We'll see if it comes back again. But maybe it has seeded, and if we can protect that area, maybe we'll have another 1 or 2. We used to have one in the back, and Spencer thinks we planted something over it, but I didn't see it come back last year, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It wasn't technically on our property. It was right on the other side of our property. So I'm really, really pleased that there's one on my property. Okay, I digress. Not a weed, just something beautiful. All right, let's continue on our walk of weeds. Okay, so another big clump of the Crocosmia, and you can see it's all like new growth, and we usually just like pull it all out, especially now that the Bear's Breeches is as big as it is. It just starts looking messy instead of, you know, like a nice clump. Something else that people don't love growing, this is creeping, is this Creeping Charlie? No, this is something else. This is a weed. This is a dandelion. It's growing in this pot, so you can kind of see. It has a taproot. There's 2 of them. Anyways, it has a taproot, and this is what you would clean up, dry, or roast in the oven, and this is what you use in your tea. But for example, the tea that I drink, I use about a cup of dandelion, dried dandelion root every month. Well, I'd have to have so many dandelions to get a cup every single month, and I really just don't want to grow like that many dandelions. Okay, so again, in this area, lots of Crocosmia to remove. Then we have the hardy geranium. A lot of people will remove the hardy geranium because it does spread and kind of take over areas in the garden. And you might not want that. So we have pretty much corralled all of our hardy geranium to this patch. It was all over this hillside. There's still a little bit up in there, which is okay. It has a purple flower that blooms for a really long time. It's really pretty. It can look messy, and it can kind of take over. All right, here we go. Here's a big crop of this bittercress that is in bloom. You can see little white flowers early enough in the year that I can grab these and pull them out. Probably do that after this video. So take all my time doing this. They're really easy to pull, but every little tiny one will just take over. Just takes over. Some things you just can't leave. You can't leave it alone once you see it as a gardener. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's a bunch over here. All right, here's another thing that's growing in this bed that has always grown in this bed, and this is horsetail. They get quite large, and they spread pretty easy. And if you leave any little bits in the ground, they will just grow back. We've suppressed a lot of our horsetail. And And when they're this size, this is about the time I come out and pop them all out of the ground. Sometimes I wait until they're a few inches taller. I do actually use my horsetail as a tooth powder. So horsetail is a native. It's been used for hundreds of years by our Native Americans. We have a ton on the property. I really want to encourage it to grow all underneath my rhododendrons. So I want to limb them up, and just every time we weed the horsetail, we'll just throw it over there and hopefully just get a big crop underneath there. Because I do actually really like, I also use it dried in some teas that I make, and like I said, in a tooth powder, which I really enjoy. So it helps your teeth stay strong. I don't know that it really has whitening properties, but I like it. So we do let it grow in certain areas of the garden, but we don't let it grow everywhere. So we just try to suppress it and encourage it in appropriate place. The fact of the matter is, weeds are only a weed when a plant is growing in a place that you don't want it to grow. So any plant can be a weed. You could have a beautiful plant. It would be considered a weed if you want to pull it out and throw it away, or it makes you pull your hair out because it drives you crazy. So all plants have its place and purpose, right? Okay, I have another weed that I want to show you that grows all over in the creeks and whatnot. They're not all up in our creek yet, but we have one that blooms early in the year, and it's just starting to come into bloom right now. So right here, I have a patch of primrose. Aren't those so beautiful? These overwinter in my garden. I always end up picking up a handful of primroses every year and just adding them in. They're not 100% guaranteed to come back, but the majority of them do. Look at this one. Isn't that so cute? That's actually a primula, and these are primroses. And then we have the chocolate ajuga here, and we have the native viola there. We also have, we've got some horsetail back there. We've got some ivy back there. We have calla lilies that are just starting to come up. I see some really fresh growth right there. And we have this. This is a skunk cabbage. And you can see the leaves are just starting to unfurl, and the yellow flower is there. It comes here every single year. It gets huge, and it's really fun because it's just this really bright, it gets bigger. The flower itself gets bigger. Really bright, fun pop of color that we can see from our deck, which is really great when it's, you know, it's cold and rainy, and our springs here can be very wet and long, and it's just really fun to see this sweet little patch of color and this bright yellow flower. So a skunk cabbage is certainly considered a weed. It's called skunk cabbage because it smells like skunk spray. But there's a lot of positive qualities to the skunk cabbage, which I'm not like 100% on, so maybe I'll just make a little list and put it on the screen right there for you to read. All right, let's keep going. Some people will consider vinca a nuisance. It is a ground cover. It's got the best little periwinkle flowers on it. It can be a little bit of an aggressive deal. All right, so then see, I have more of this. I can't remember what it's called. Why can't I remember what it's called? And it can be, my dad has a ton, and I can see why people would maybe think it's a weed in some cases, but it's pretty well behaved in my garden, so I leave it. All right, so we're gonna just take a gander here. All these patches, little patch. Those are all daisies. Now, many people will pull those because they self-seed and they take over everywhere. But oh my goodness, when they're in bloom, it's the best thing ever. So we let ours be, and then we just dig out the patches like these ones that are in the walkway. We'll just come through and dig those out, but we can leave all those, right? If they're in an area we don't want them, we'll just dig them out. It's no big deal. All right, what else? I planted comfrey right here. These little tiny leaves. Yeah, it will never go away. I've got another clump down there that I want. Man, if you want something that's guaranteed to come back, comfrey. Whew. And it gets huge. So be aware. Do love my comfrey. It has stopped me from bleeding more than once. Really important plant to have in the garden, but it can definitely be weedy. See, here's my other little patch of hardy geranium. Okay. Trying to discern what else may be considered a weed. If I'm walking around and you see something that you would consider a weed in your garden, I would love to know. Because sometimes things that aren't very weedy here are weedy someplace else, or, you know, different things. So we do have lots of the native Oregon strawberry growing along our house there. It actually grows everywhere. And it was really thick in this bed, and Spencer and I pulled it all out of there last year. We've been reducing where it was, reducing, and now we've decided that no more strawberry in this area. We do have blue star creeper in this area, but we also have grass coming up through the blue star creeper. So, you know, that's something that we're always having to kind of struggle with here. Then we also have this. Oh, it's just now starting to come up places. This is millet, which is from birdseed. We don't have a bird feeder right in this area, but the birds bring it everywhere. And this isn't a weed, but it's certainly a culprit. Slugs this time of year, they are just like never ending. All right. I wish the slugs would eat the millet. That'd be great. They don't eat the millet. They eat the things I love. All right, so then in this little privet area, okay, well, privets can be considered weeds. They can be a little bit of a nuisance. For us, they really just, if you cut them down, they're just gonna grow again from the trunk. But even when we've let it go to seed, we're not seeing them pop up in different places, although I've heard that happens. It's just not happening here for whatever reason. Okay, so we have the blue star creeper. We also have the pearly everlasting, which you could see has spread quite a bit. I love it. Spencer's not a huge fan. He tolerates it. But you could see that it could be a nuisance. We also have some more buttercup. We have viola. And we have, oh, look, they're blooming. How exciting. We have little clumps of forget-me-not. These are not weeds. I don't think they're weeds. Look at them. Aren't they just adorable? Oh. But, you know, maybe they are a weed in some garden. Got a dandelion there. I think that's it. We've got some bleeding hearts. Those are pretty easy to stay under control, but they will spread around a little bit, the bleeding hearts. These are native, just starting to come into bloom there. What else? Oh, how can I forget my rose campium? Well, y'all know I love my rose campium. Love it. Love the flower. Love the evergreen interest. Love the blue. Love the fuzzy. It's like a lamb's ear fuzzy plant. It is so weedy. It sells seeds everywhere. So we have this clump. This is the only clump. And then I planted one over there because I thought it was something else. Anyway, that one's gone. But since then, we have gotten rose campium everywhere. So there's a clump right here. Okay, there's a clump right here. There's a clump here. And all that. And right here and here. All around here. And then I thought, well, maybe I can corral it and keep it under control. So I put big clumps all along the edge here. And of course, those ones didn't bloom last year. Okay, well, maybe they will this year. I don't know. They do need to be cleaned up. They kind of get like this, you know, the old foliage needs to come out. Also, slugs lay their eggs in them, but they don't eat them. So, I don't know. It's a love-hate. I really love the flower, though. They're really easy to pull up. They're just very prolific. Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm probably missing some like glaringly obvious one, but you know, we just learn to live with our weeds. And we learn to accept them for what they are and embrace them when we can, like the horsetail that I like to use. We have some plantain that we've used in the past. That's not up right now, so I can't show you. And then, you know, then there's the culprits that we really wish we could get rid of, like the bittercress and the buttercup and Himalayan blackberry. We don't have enough of that blackberry to like grow into berries. And then if we did, it would probably be even worse to deal with. So, I mean, I do love a good blackberry, don't get me wrong. It's just maybe like a thornless variety that doesn't get out of control. And we do have a little bit of Oregon blackberry on the other side of the creek, but we don't really like see it very much. I think it just gets a lot of sun and dies pretty quickly in the spring. So, yeah. Anyway, there you have it. Appreciate your weeds, because what else can you do? Especially this time of year. I mean, it's just, they're just gonna be here. So recognizing what they are good for, like some plants are really good to help with like erosion, or like the ivy and the lamium is really great with our erosion issues, or the water, like the areas that are like really full of water. There's really great plants and sometimes considered weeds like the skunk cabbage that thrive in those conditions and prevent other weeds from coming in, or just provide habitat for wildlife. So there's ways that you could just embrace your weeds and appreciate them for what they are, and then get rid of them when you can. If you want to. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of weeds, this little weed walk of of spring in the garden. And I'm hoping that you're not overrun and overwhelmed with weeds in your own garden, and that you're celebrating your life. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye.